5 years ago, I sold my home because I thought that that life of freedom would fix everything. And a year and a half ago, I quit my full-time lucrative job in London because I was ready to embrace a life of more freedom and let me pursue my goals. But here I am in midlife, and things haven't turned out the way I expected, including facing real housing insecurity for the first time. Self-employment hasn't turned out the way I hoped, and someone said that you're only a couple bad decisions away from homelessness, and that feels very real right now. By the way, I have some notes over here because otherwise I'll go off track. So if you see me looking over here, that's why. If you're new here, my name's Lisa. I'm a dual US-UK citizen living in Britain for more than 20 years. And for context, I have worked every year that I've been in this country, other than the last one. I've paid lots of taxes. I've built up pension pots when I could. And I still feel like I've made some financial mistakes. When you move countries, you give up a lot of those safety nets that you would normally have: friends, family, familiarity, fallback options. And when you move, you build everything up from scratch. So yeah, I did that when I had a lot more energy in my 20s and 30s. So I also just want to quickly add that I don't drive here, so that does limit a lot of my options. And also, curious thoughts, comments are very welcome, but I'm not in the mood to deal with harsh commentary. I'll just do what a lot of other people do, and I will remove those comments. So what prompted me to sell? So selling my maisonette was a really difficult decision, but it came at the start of the COVID pandemic. I just knew I didn't want to live there anymore, I think is the simplest answer. I also didn't want to be a landlord. So in the past, I had been a landlord when I owned a house with my ex. And so I had a bit of experience. And then when I initially moved out of that maisonette, I rented, and the tenants were there 7 months and they trashed it. So that was awful. It was my first solo home. So anyway, I mean, the other reason was that it was a maisonette with 4 units in it, and the things like the fabric of the building were the shared responsibility of the other leaseholders, and it just would have been really difficult to track down all of the other leaseholders if anything went wrong with the roof, which it would eventually. And then there was the traumatic water meter incident where I thought I would get a water meter installed, and then I got a letter from Thames Water because they said that I was using unusually high amounts of water, and they were quizzing me. Well, I phoned them up and they were quizzing me about like dishwashers, and I was like, and yeah, there was a water leak, and it was my responsibility now. And they also wanted to charge me for all of the water that had flowed through since they switched on the water meter. And I mean, I had to push back at that, don't I? Like that they never would have known about the water leak if they hadn't had a water meter installed. I realized probably later that the freeholder might have been responsible, but by then it was all done and dusted, and that just said to me, oh my God, I'm not cut out for solo homeownership. So during those COVID years, everything felt very chaotic for a lot of people for various reasons. For me, I ended up moving a lot. And I mean, I think I was in like 5 different postcodes across 3 regions. I was in Bristol, I was in Hampshire, and I was in my South London place. Every single time I moved, it was the same, set up a new home. Sometimes I'd have to get in new appliances. I'd be moving furniture. I'd be organizing someone to help me move, shutting down utilities, starting up utilities. And, it was a big waste of money, right? But I've always loved moving house. Like even from my 20s, I really enjoyed it. And I realize now that it is ADHD. So when COVID hit, that ability to travel ceased. So I'm not fully understanding why at the time, but I funneled that into moving house. And the cost of that, lifestyle, the cost of moving is massive. Not just the money, but it's, impacts friendships, impacts mental, just like having to, you know, face packing and unpacking again and again. So there's that. Okay, so what else? So fast forward a couple years, and I found myself in a really dire mental state. We're talking fully burnt out. And perimenopause, Any men watching are looking away now. That's fine. It made everything worse. Around that time, I realized that my symptoms might not just be perimenopause. So I pursued a private ADHD diagnosis. And so after the ADHD diagnosis, I got the autism diagnosis, and both were affirmative. For For anyone who thinks that people like me are buying ADHD diagnoses for fun, I need you to know they cost about £1,500 and they take hours and hours and hours to prepare the documentation, to get testimony from family members that knew you as a child and also people who know you now. And then, of course, all the clinical appointments. So it's really not something you do for fun, or, there's no real benefit other than now you finally have some answers about why you've been struggling your whole life. It actually reminds me a lot of the amount of preparation it takes to get permanent residency or citizenship. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. And it costs a lot of money. Along with the ADHD chaos, there's also the autism. And that, for me, manifests itself in a lot of sensory sensitivities to light, to noise, to vibrations, to smells. Like, I get quite queasy sometimes if there's like a smell that my body doesn't agree with. And that means that sharing a home with somebody, like being in a house share, is really difficult because you can't control always the sounds, the smells, people moving around, people making noise. And I also can't relax or concentrate easily with people around, especially people I don't know. So it's any of that unpredictability makes it very challenging. Like, you really have to like a person to live with them. So all of that led me towards becoming a full-time cat sitter. And at first, so you're wondering, well, what's wrong with cat sitting? What worked? What didn't? Well, honestly, overall it works. At first, it was really great. I love cats, and I've seen so many wonderful places around England. Most of the humans have been very lovely too. They're often very curious about my lifestyle as a cat mad nomad, but they're very kind. Overall, I was spending a lot less money, but there are impacts to that lifestyle. So one of them is that it's more difficult for me to earn money, and I'll go into that. And the other is that there's just this overall hassle factor. One of the most difficult parts is securing cat sits so that the dates line up. And so, you need to allow some time to travel between cat sits. And sometimes an owner might let me stay one night or even two to bridge the gap. But a lot of times I needed to look at Airbnb or hotels or even going to stay with friends. But, it does become a lot when you're on the train and you've got all your bags. And then there's the living out of bags. I know a lot of people have said to me, well, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. And it's fine at first, especially because you feel really free, that you're not overwhelmed with these like decisions about what to wear, because you only have, generally, pretty limited choices of clothing and footwear. So one of the other challenges was cooking. I feel like I have like food insecurity, and you're always getting used to new kitchens, having to, well, when you're cat sitting, usually you can use some spices and oils, but for the most part, you've got to go get all your food. And so it's like finding where to get groceries and bring it all back. And then you can't really stock up on things. You can't buy in bulk. Typically, if you're at a cat sit and you're only going to be there for 2 weeks. So that means that you're buying in smaller quantities. So that becomes more expensive also. Yeah, and I ended up leaving a lot of food behind. So yeah, it's not ideal. Forget about having a skincare routine or an exercise routine, unless you are just running, but I'm not running. just over a year of this full-time cat sitting, I took a pause to do some travel and become like a digital nomad. And that was awesome, but it got very expensive again. What's wild is a year ago, I was in Australia and I was really happy to be making YouTube videos and thinking about my next steps in life. But the feelings were starting to creep in about how much money I was spending. And yeah, I mean, where does it all go from here? So I do enjoy travel, but the the challenges with being a full-time nomad are, as you would expect. Yeah. I mean, the big ones for me was that I couldn't get prescriptions filled. I would I would accidentally leave things behind. Yeah. I mean, I had to put a stop to prescription sunglasses because it's just too expensive. I had to downgrade myself to normal ones, just, ones you get from Boots or whatever. Yeah, I accidentally left behind lots of things or would lose them when I was in transit. So, yeah. AirPods that would fall out of my ear and then anyway. So that wasn't good. We call it the ADHD tax. And by the way, if you don't think that ADHD and autisms are disabilities, you can please keep that opinion to yourself. So after 2.5 years as a nomad, I burned out. There was the constant moving. I know a lot of people have told me they could never be a nomad, and other people have lasted a lot longer than I have. Well, actually, I'm still a nomad, but I'm basically trying to wind down that phase of my life. So, yeah, what would a home fix? A stable base sounds really good to me because it means I can access health and food, and I have more access to earning money, if that makes sense. And honestly, peace. So, as I mentioned, I'm a UK citizen. I have the NHS access, which is great. But I'm nowhere near my registered GP most of the time. So that's a problem. In terms of health, I am getting older. I need to keep my body stronger. The best way for me to do that is something like Pilates and some free weights. And I just can't do that if I'm moving around, at least not if I'm moving around on trains. In the course of putting this all together, I realized that, as long as I stay in places where I can maybe Uber between places, that might actually be a pretty good halfway compromise, but we'll get to that. I know that people are going to say you could go to the gym. No, I hate gyms. Or, that I could just, use a towel on the floor. They don't have the grip. I mean, and I don't know, I just like the solidness of a proper yoga mat that protects me from whatever random stuff is on whatever random floor I'm on. So money-wise, I mentioned it gives me access to earn more money. So there's a few things going on there. One is if I needed to have a stable commute somewhere, I would. The other is that if I wanted to get a job locally, I don't know, I'm just at a supermarket. I don't think I'm cut out for a supermarket from all the sensory stuff I mentioned before, but just, for example, that's there available to me if I had a steady place. I could also vote again. And then there's also the fact that, as a freelancer and someone making YouTube videos when I can, that, not having this stable place to work has become the issue, right? For YouTube, instead of just like flicking on the camera in a studio setup, I have to figure out which room I can film in, where's the light, get the sound. I mean, I don't even know how this sound's going to turn out. It's a little bit echoey in here. Getting the camera angles right, everything. It's not easy. And of course, I could film outside, and I have, but there's something unpredictable about being outside that I do feel a lot more secure filming indoors. I don't know, maybe it's a woman traveling alone thing, but it's like if I'm filming, then my attention is elsewhere. I'm sorry, I'm going off on a also wanted to say with working is that I can have a monitor. So I recently just bought a monitor because I thought I was going to be in a more stable housing situation. That's ongoing. I don't know yet, but And having a monitor though, that's like a game changer, especially when it comes to the productivity of video editing as well as just doing my freelance work. It's just like the little things. Right now I'm in an Airbnb that costs way more than I'm comfortable paying, but it's quiet, it's clean, and it was available for a full month, which I just desperately wanted. I mean, like something clicked for me before, but gosh, it's so crystal clear now that I can now safely answer the question, like, what does housing insecurity feel like? And housing insecurity is more than wondering if you have a roof over your head next month. It's affecting friendships, it's affecting healthcare, it's affecting your ability to plan, your ability to earn money, it's your sense of stability. So, okay, now what? What can I do next? So, thankfully I'm not running out of money yet, but I am pragmatic. I need to earn more. And so a lot of the more fun and creative endeavors I need to set aside for now. In terms of housing, though, option one is I keep house sitting. I only ever look after cats, just because I understand them, they understand me, and they're a little bit less work than dogs. But it's not hassle-free. Like the type of cats that people have house sitters come look after are the kind of cat that, want people around. They want cuddles and to be brushed and to be played with. So, it's not this like free ride, basically, is what I'm trying to say. House sitting is actually time consuming. You don't get to just sit at someone else's house. Anyway, but the thing about that is I need to make sure that they are 1 month as much as possible. I mean, at least 3 weeks, because anything less than that it's too disruptive. It's just too much work to do that turnaround of like packing everything, cleaning everything, getting to the next destination, trains, maybe even hotels. Like I can't be doing that too frequently. Option two is I rent a flat, and it's the one I really want to do, but something's holding me back just right now. The fact of the matter is that it's winter, so not only would I be paying rent, but I'd also be facing some pretty stiff heating bills. And also the fact that I don't have pay slips. They're probably going to want 6 months rent up front, which is a lot of money. And even if I move outside of the Southeast, like it's still freaking expensive in England. And I could go further away. I could go up north, but again, and I'm like, then I'm losing access to my friends, which I don't think is ideal. Oh, and you might be wondering, well, why don't you move in with your friends? I mean, first of all, none of them have offered. And not everybody, I don't know. I just don't feel like I don't think any of us want that. Like in an ideal world, I just have my own space that I can control. However, option three, option three is the guardianship schemes. So if you're not aware of that, it's when larger properties, typically they invite people to live there for a reduced rent to keep the property occupied and basically safe from vandalism. But in practical sense, it basically is like a giant house share. I can't imagine what it would be like to live with, let's just say, for example, it's a former school building or a former, I don't know, police station or some kind of large building that it's like, maybe transitioning between uses. It sounds sketchy for me as a solo woman. I think it might be fine if you were a man or if you were in a couple or something like that. So I'm gonna try not to think about that one right now. Option four is I go back to a house share. I've outlined many reasons why I don't think that's viable. I mean, it could work if if I was sharing with maybe one other person and they were out of the house a lot, but I'm I am a homebody, like even though I love wandering I actually spend much of the day at home, either because I'm working or I don't know, I just don't need to be out and about all the time. That's not, I don't know how to describe it. But yeah, basically I can't concentrate very well if I can hear lots of other people making noise. And I mean, I just can't relax if I'm not alone, like home alone for a chunk of the day. And when you're sharing with other people, you don't get a say in who else is coming over, what noise they're making, like everything. So I'm gonna put that one aside for the minute now too. Option Option five is I spend winter somewhere warm again, but it would have to be incredibly cheap, so not Australia. Um, I've got a wedding to go to in March in the US, so feel like I feel like I should stay in England, really. So I guess I'm wondering, like, have I missed anything? Are there other options? Like, I didn't mention things like, you go volunteer on an organic farm, but those they could have you working 20 hours a week, and that's going to leave me really no time and energy to really like focus on my self-employment or my freelancing. So, hmm, all of this is just me learning what I need from a home. I thought that the freedom from the burden of full-time work would make me give me a different life. Well, actually, it has given me a different life, but it's just not the life I envisioned. The crazy thing is that I think I've swapped my work burnout for housing burnout. So I don't know. This is a work in progress, this life. I mean, I could handle renovating a house when I owned it with a partner, but things like water meter and roofing crisis on my own, I can't handle. So home ownership is not that they would give me a mortgage anyway, but that's off the table. So this is a work in progress. I'm figuring out what a stable life looks like that works for me now that spent the first nearly 50 years thinking I was just like everybody else, but, struggling and. Now I know that I'm neurodivergent. I have very specific needs, and I just need to figure out a way to make everything work for me. So watch this space.